Well, hello there and welcome to another edition of the Big Q. Today I'm joined by one young person at the sidelines of the Youth Connection. Of course, we're talking about the African continent, we're talking about the youth, and we're talking about the growth and development of the youth in general. That's why I'm joined by Liz Muange, who is the Deputy Director Investment at the East Africa Trade and Investment Hub in Nairobi, Kenya. Thank you, Liz, for making time to be with us, and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Fiona, for hosting me. I'm glad to be here, especially given that it's a very important few days here, connecting youth across Africa. I'm glad to give my voice to the event.
Absolutely. Now, Liz, let's talk about you sitting at a helm, you're a deputy director of a big company, if I should put it that way. How does that make you feel as a youth, and how are you perceived at your workplace?
That's an interesting question. Definitely it's been, a journey getting there. Trying to build the right level of experience, because I realized that as a young person, if you're able to speak candidly and speak with authority about your professional field, people will, especially the older generation, will be able to see the value that you bring. So it's always been about how, even if I'm working with people who are definitely way older than me, and with this big title, how do I live up to it, but how do I deliver? So delivery is key. And not just being technically sound, but being able to relate with people. That has been one of the key things that has, kind of led me to I've been able to get to.
Let's talk about the spirit of entrepreneurship. Of course, you've moved across the globe, you've moved across the continent, and of course, it is a thing that the youth are now embracing, that they're trying to grow with. What's your take on the spirit of entrepreneurship? Has the youth in the African continent, have they really grasped that that concept?
Yeah. So currently where I work at the East Africa Trade and Investment Hub, we help promote companies export to the US market. And working on the investment team, I help to support them access funding. And there's a lot of funding in the market, but I think one of the challenges that we face, especially as young people who are entrepreneurs, is the money that's there is competitive. So you have to be able to have a very refined business model and business strategy that somebody can easily see how they are making money, what is the path to growth, because a lot of money will want a return, and they want to return at a certain point in time. So at the point where they need to exit, how is this enterprise being able to deliver on the value? And I think that's where I see young businesses fail, and business is also started by young people, because it's not so much about the passion that I have to start something, or being able to transfer my hobby into an income generating venture. It's again, how am I building a growth strategy? Because your business should be able to grow you should see the growth from when you start to 3 years to 5 years. And I think what has happened in Africa generally is that we have businesses that are very traditional. You can be doing the same thing you've been doing for over 10 years. We have a lot of businesses that are also operating at a startup level, but they've been there for quite a long time. But with entrepreneurship, like for example in the US, where startups go to Silicon Valley and they're able to really grow. Look at Facebook, WhatsApp, and that level of growth is something that we haven't seen in Africa, and it's a lot of companies that are now struggling to understand what that is, because a lot of investors come to Africa thinking that they can get that level of growth or build that level of growth. Is there success stories? Yes, there are a few companies that are really doing well, integrating technology into their traditional business models, have been able to attract quite a lot of funding. But I think that as someone setting up the enterprise now, you have the advantage to learn from others, and be able to start things at a more advanced knowledge level, reducing the risks of mistakes. And there's also a lot of support now that is being offered to entrepreneurs through incubation hubs, acceleration hubs, where even somewhere you just need your business idea, and they will help shape your idea. They'll help grow you into being, a business manager. They'll help you understand what you need to build your operations and the team, and to a certain extent also provide seed funding. There isn't as much capital that goes to startup ventures, because I know for sure banks will not give you money. If you're looking at microfinance institutions, they also, have their own restrictions. the risk. We don't have enough local angel investors investing into local companies, and a lot of the foreign funding, it comes with its own challenges in terms of access. And a lot of, there's been a study that's been done that a lot of funding is going to foreign, foreign CEOs of companies. But I don't see it as a bad thing. I see it that we need to rise up and really invest in our own. And I feel that these conversations that we're having now in different spaces will be able to create that level of investment in future.
Liz, we're in a generation where, if I should put it this way, the elder generation like to say we have a microwave, generation. A microwave generation that wants things, set up my money, start up, running, succeeding. I want you to give us your take, basically. Look at experience vis-a-vis education, because right now we are in a place where the social media is really telling us we are going to a place where education won't be that necessary, but your think tank, your thinking, your philosophy, your experience will come. Is that where we're really heading to? When you look at your experience with this.
Yeah, I want to say that education will not be as important. Education is very important because you can really set apart somebody who's educated and who's illiterate, and you can see the difference in terms of how they can engage. But I think it's how the education should change. It should change to match up to where we are at, and also just look into the future, because there's new economies that are coming up that we need skills for. There's traditional businesses that need to change and do things in a different way, and education is a big part of that. But is the education that we have currently in Africa working for us? I don't think it is. We're not as competitive. When it comes to the older generation, I think there's like an intergenerational divide, and we're in a different world. And our parents also need to understand that the way the world is changing, the rise of the digital economy, careers will change. There's a lot of discussions about the future of work and where that's going, and how are we being competitive in a global world. We can't just be going to school, learning things that are not practical within the workplace, and also just not having the skills that are needed or right for this changing environment. We have to invest a lot, and this is where the government needs to invest quite a lot in making sure that the level of skill that's coming out from the African institutions is at par or meeting global standards, because this is also what will make youth more competitive in a global landscape. And the older generation also have to find a way of working, because if you go into workplace, you'll probably find a lot of people who are like, you want to do it this way because it's quicker, but we have experience, we've done this before, and there has to be a balance, because things are changing, and there has to be that level of interaction where they can see what value the young people with a different skill set are bringing on board.
Lisa, the Youth Connect, just when it was starting, we had a young person saying it is time for the elderly generation to retire. Do you feel it's time for them to retire? And by retiring, who are we calling for to retire and to give these spaces to who? Are the young people actually ready to take up this mantle?
I wouldn't say retire. I would say there should be a way of them impacting the skills and knowledge they have, because there is no that way. I feel like it's like, for example, in different in the workplace, unless as a young person you're able to get a mentor who will guide you and help you in decision making, maybe open doors for you or give you insights as to where you can lead your life into, and there are mentors who are there, and I think more young people need to start getting in touch with them, just so that these conversations start to happen, and then we're not looking at them as people who need to retire because they're taking up opportunities for us. And then again, I think the other thing is that the institutions that we have, and outside of private sector, let me talk about government, because I think government is where there's a lot of challenges in terms of youth trying to see where they can place themselves. Being here in Rwanda, you see young people everywhere in government, which is a good sign, because 10 years from now, they're the ones who are going to be leading, being cabinet secretaries, PSs, and that kind of thing. But in other countries, I come from Kenya, where it's very difficult for a young person to see, themselves through a government position, or to see themselves even in a political party leadership. because I feel like the route towards being able to get there, it's either the information is either not there, number one, or it's also a murky kind of how do you get it? Do you have to be a hooligan, to be able to be seen as the one who can, lead people and that kind of thing? I don't think so, because there are a lot of people who are smart. Maybe they can impact in terms of policy. They can think about things differently. A lot of young people are now traveling. We're seeing a lot of best practice from different parts of the world. How can we be able to support our governments, be able to create opportunities for us? Because we are the young people, we are the ones who can tell them, no, this and this can work for us, try and test it. Give us this opportunity to be able to write a policy and see it through and implement it and get the support that's needed. I don't think that it's that easy. Yeah. So I wouldn't say they should retire, but they should
live the next space in some ways. Yeah. You talked about import and exports and how your company helps the young people, sell their products, if I should use it in a more simpler term. Just the other day, my President Paul Kagame, mentioned how it is sad to see that the Africans actually taking their raw materials, taking it abroad, and then it is recycled, manufactured, and still brought back to Africa and sold at a higher price, which I have to agree is quite devastating. So in your role, what do you do to ensure that we reduce this? Do we need more industries? Do we need more manufacturers? What do we need to ensure that the richness of Africa actually stays? Because I think it's about time. We can't keep staying in the pre-colonial or colonial era.
I don't think we need more industries as yet, because I think maybe we do have enough capacity. But what I would say is always start, building a market. So currently in my project, we help support companies export more to the US market and the African Growth and Opportunity Act.
Which is African products.
Yes. So it's helping East African countries be able to export to the US market, help them be competitive to a US buyer, and be able to sell their produce there. And what we've done over time is move outside of sectors such as textile and apparel, which are large manufacturing firms, but also move to smaller other sectors like home decor and fashion accessories, specialty foods. How can somebody in Rwanda making high value gourmet coffee be able to export to the US market? And what we've seen is, and I can give a very good example, like in Uganda, we had this lady making very beautiful fashion wear, like horns. And what happens is that if you're able to get a buyer who finds your product unique and loves it, that is where the trade begins, because I think understanding doing a product that understands the market is the main point. Once you're able to get the market and access it, then work backwards. How then do you start building a production and also widening markets to other places? Because the US is just one market. We've seen some of our companies actually growing and serving other markets, because what happens is that they become competitive. And what I also encourage is young people to get into the trade, because we have a lot of young people doing very good fashion wear, very good leather bags. I think in Rwanda there's Uzuri doing very beautiful sandals, and they're part of our program. We've supported them to be able to access the US market. But as I said, the US is just one market. And for us, what we've learned is there's lack of information, especially for people wanting to get into this. And by providing information, how do you start the process? Where do you need to go? Which government agencies will give you, the right support? How do you get your standards done? And then on the US market, what we do also is build support on the markets, helping the buyers understand that Africa is, a good market. I mean, a good potential source of your raw materials. And what we've seen is that, especially like, for example, in the coffee sector and tea, there's a lot more processing that's being done, but for specialty type of coffee and tea. And this can grow into, just trying also maybe to do then, things like Nescafe and other brands. But we need to do more of it. And the information is just one aspect of it. And for young people especially, I feel that it's very difficult. You get into entrepreneurship and you're playing in a field where the big boys have been there. How do you start exporting? And you almost see like it's not possible, but it is very possible. But what will be different is your product. And Yeah.
The difference is with your product, of course. Before we take a short break, quickly take us through embracing opportunities, because we know there's lack of information you've mentioned. How do you feel in this gap? Do we always have to Google? Where do we have this network of people that we get this information for and not get lost along the way and know that we can actually go up that ladder?
Yeah, I think this is very specific, because I always say, you can't say there's lack of information. There's information everywhere, but how do you get the right level of information?
Yes.
And I would say for any person who's starting an enterprise, if you've narrowed down to a sector, map out all the information sources for that sector and go and speak to them, because what I've realized, especially supporting youth in Kenya, is that sometimes other young people have access to other opportunities, but they don't share this. And it's only when you have constant discussions or when there are forums is when they can tell you, oh, by the way, I was able to access land at a good rate from this entity, because they do provide that. I was able to go for a trade mission and it was paid for because I was able to pitch my products this way, so it's mapping out as many stakeholders and reaching out to them, understanding what opportunities they have for you, sharing your product, understand, and letting them also give you critique and letting them also help guide you. But I would say that this information is there. If you like, for example, if you want to, if you're in agribusiness and you want to export your product, there's some level of information nowadays that even if you go to the ministry's website, there are key bodies. There's also associations that also help provide information. So you can't just be sitting at home saying there's no information when you haven't gone out to find it.
So you have to walk out.
You have to
work out for it.
Yeah, you have to.
Well, we do take a short break. Of course, when we come back, we keep talking about entrepreneurship and how we as African youth can keep growing together and learn to share the information. So do keep it the Big Q. Welcome back, and thank you very much for keeping it the Big Q. I'm still talking to Liz Muange, who is, of course, the Deputy Director at the Investment East Africa Trade and Investment Hub in Nairobi, Kenya. And, of course, she is one of the young leaders who are doing what we other youth of the African continent should be doing, taking up the risks and, of course, jumping on to climbing that ladder. Liz, we're still talking about entrepreneurship and, of course, your role as one of the people who pushes, for the business to run around the East African continent, the East African region, and also the continent and globally. An issue that has always been risen, or that has always locked down, if I should put it that way, entrepreneurs, is the issue of business proposals. You find that there are too many business proposals, but at the end of the day, you go and they tell you they all failed. Why do business proposals fail? How should we write a business proposal? Where do we start from,
I think business proposal, because a proposal you just write it out to map out what you really want to do. So it's the thinking behind it, and the implementation of that proposal. There are people who write perfect documents, and these perfect documents can help you win whatever funding. But if you're not able to implement that idea, then is when your business fails. So what I advise you, because it's easy to just give people a template, but what I help them do is really think through what they're going to put down and think through it from the point of view, is it realistic for my business? Is it something that I can do with all the resources that I have and also with the resources that I'm looking for? And how can I implement this and actually be sustainable? And the other thing is also, how do you phase out your your proposal or the stages of growth in your business, such that you're not implementing or doing too many things at one time, but you're seeing how the steps that you're taking lead to other more fruitful steps. With business proposal writing, there's a lot of resources now to help entrepreneurs. There's a lot of even online templates. But what I would also encourage is, there's a lot of, let's say, like pitching competitions and everything, and they help, before you get into one, they help you, they give you the information that is needed. And this helps you also now plan out your proposal. But that is just one, that is just the writing and the pitching. But I think when you're trying to think through about your business, because in my previous role, I was doing a lot of fundraising support for companies. So really helping them think through, if you've said that you want to start a juice processing factory, do you have the technical expertise, number one? Because technical expertise is the key thing. if you know, investors back people, and they back people with the skills and
yes.
with the technical know-how to do something. And if, as an entrepreneur, you have a good idea, but you know you're not the one who can implement it fully, how do you get the team that will support you? Because without that team, you're not gonna, you know, you're gonna fail.
It's quite important as well.
Yes, the team with the right technical expertise. Yes. That's number one. And then number two is, how do you ensure that you kick off your project well? Because from moving from idea to actual implementation. And I feel that a lot of people have an idea, because any investor will ask you, have you tested this idea? What has been the result? And if you've not gone to that level of testing it, even in a small way, you know, you know, if you want to start a juice processing plant, can you make juice and sell? Do you have a client for that juice that you want to sell? You know, it's taking things back and starting. And I would say always just start, because whatever you learn during that startup phase of trial and error will help you build out, you know, a bigger proposal for what you want to do.
We touch on agribusiness now. Agribusiness is not something that many youth have embraced, you know.
Yes.
But it's something that has really grown, and we have seen people succeed just because of agriculture. You know, what should be done to ensure that agriculture is more demystified and it's, you know, it's attractive, you know, if I should use that word, to the youth, so that we are not left hungry?
Yeah. I think you're right, because we had this discussion, you know, with a group of young people, and it was during AGRF, and we were asking, you know, what will take youth to get into agriculture, and you know, I looked back and I was like, you know, a lot of young people, they go through, like in Kenya, for example, I did agriculture in high school, but a lot of the times when we needed to do like digging or not even practicals, like punishment, it was go dig the garden, take a djembe, go do this. So it was almost like agriculture is a punishment. So there's that mentality throughout school. And if you look at, you know, really rural schools, I mean boarding schools in rural areas, that agriculture is seen as a form of punishment, you know. But yeah, go and weed, you know, those kinds of things. But outside of that, agriculture really is the backbone of any economy. And if we are able to get production really right, there's a lot that you can do, because then you can process and that kind of thing. Getting young people into agriculture is, you know, there's a lot that needs to happen. Number one, it's of course they have to have access to where they're going to grow, so access to land. And you know, land is a big issue now. We don't have, there's not as much land as there was before, and it's also very expensive to own land.
Yes.
And if your parents don't have a lot of land, you know, how do you get access to land? How do you get leased land? So arrangements for leasing land, knowing even who's willing to lease and where they are. And I think there's some streamlining that needs to be done on that. And then number two, it's the technical expertise, you know. A lot of people just, they don't invest in the technical knowledge. You know, you grow chicken, maybe chicken is easy, but if you want to go into something like aquaculture or go into more intensive production, then you know, you need some level of technical knowledge, and being able to access that knowledge, I think, is one of the barriers that young people face. You can go to school, but how then do you get the right expertise that you need? I think that's a challenge. And then the other challenge is that the value chains that we have sometimes are very informal. And if you're not able to see how you'll make money, or if you're producing and they're not making any money, and there's many middlemen in between, and they're not adding any value, but they're eating a certain percentage, you know, it's very frustrating. And what I've seen is a lot of investment goes to value chains that are very formal, you know, like dairy, for example, is very formalized, poultry, coffee. But if you go into things like maybe grains, and it's a little bit informal, and that's also what impacts access to finance.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
As we sum up, Liz, what would you say, one, the tips that should keep African youth in Africa? We are tired of seeing young Africans die in the Mediterranean Sea, trying to get for green, you know, looking for greener pastures, which I believe there's still more opportunities here. So give us two tips, you know, for successful young youth, or what do they need to do? Get out, you know, out of their own shade and move along and grow Africa.
I think first is don't give up, because I think when you want to leave and go, you know, take extreme measures, like even just fleeing the country through different means, it's because you've given up. There's some level of hopelessness that you see. You know, the truth is that we have the opportunities. A lot of young people across the world fight to come and work here. They come to do volunteership, internship, and they're gaining some skills. But if you stay at home as a young person because you're saying you're frustrated, you can't find a job, then you know, I would say don't give up, but also go for it. Go for it. If you're not able to get a job, see how you can volunteer, see how you can find yourself in where you want to be. The other thing I think is have a plan, because there's a lot, as you said, there's a lot of competition, but there's also a lot of opportunity. But you can only do that when you've evaluated, what am I good at? What can I do with the skills that I have? How do I feel I can contribute? And then make a plan and go for it. I would say go for it. Make applications. Apply. You know, Jack Ma said he applied to Harvard 10 times. Apply, and Harvard, you know, has very strong, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But I think that's the thing. Apply, and it's not just for jobs, it's for different things. Feel free to open up and approach opportunities. Don't wait for them, because where we've reached, the people who will wait for opportunities, the opportunities will never come because others will have approached them. So you kind of have to keep the energy levels up and, you know, keep recharging. When you hit a roadblock, turn around and see how you can move forward. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Liz, for making time to be with us.
Thank you so much, Fiona.
Well, I've been speaking to Liz Mwange, who is the Deputy Director Investment at the East Africa Trade and Investment Hub. But of course, she says, be a go-getter. Hold the vision, keep holding the thread, is it?
Yes.
So to keep it the big and remember to keep sending in your questions and who you want to see on the show. And as usual, my name is Fiona Mbabazi. Keep it on the television.